Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We're taking a look back at the beginning of 2022 and reflecting on my most anticipated board games from this last year. I'm going to look at the different games that came out, those that didn't, as well as give you my opinions and where that final ranking is, my favorites of my anticipated. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow, and for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about all of the games that I was excited for back at the beginning of 2022. Now, the first game is one that was an honorable mention, and this is Vagrantsong. Now, I have played this, and it ended up being one of my favorite games of the year. You're playing as vagrants aboard a train, trying your best to restore the humanity to a variety of hanes. You do this in a campaign setting where your characters use a coin programming action system to take their actions, gaining abilities, and fighting in different scenarios. I love a lot about this game, and I've talked about it a lot, but one of my favorite things that I haven't mentioned is actually the objectives that you see during the game. So you'll have these rituals that you're trying to complete that are tied to the scenario specifically. And a lot of times you won't really know what those rituals are. You'll have this concept of you have to do an objective or task. I don't want to get into any spoilers, but it's up to you to discover that as you play. I love this because it encourages you to explore the scenario and try to come up with some way to satisfy the interesting condition. In addition, by completing these, you get more upgrades and abilities, which is something you're always hungry for, because that's one of my favorite things are the different abilities in the game. So that's the ritual system for Vagrantsong, one of my honorable mentions from my most anticipated games from last year. Now getting on to the main list, we have my number 10. This was Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. Also one of my favorites to come out from last year. I love the two-player head-to-head nature of this, but it also has amazing solo, co-op, and all the way up to 4-player as you're taking on a deck building game in a skirmish setting where you're going to have these heroes. You're using your two different currencies, one for buying cards and then one for commanding your units, and you're racing towards the different objectives. One of my favorite things about this game, though, is the champions themselves. You'll have these heroes that you're always going to have 4 with when you start the game, but there are even heroes that you can recruit as you play, spending the currency to get them onto your team, and when they show up, it's a race to try to grab them. You have characters that get free activations, that activate your other characters. You have some that allow you to move your spawn point, which is ridiculous for positioning, some that have area attack, and some that just make it so you know this character's on the board and they become an immediate threat. I love how it's encouraging you to still pay for things, get that currency, and not just focus on your board state, which gives you reasons to do everything in the game. In addition, your 4 core heroes, it's super fun to draft them at the start of the game based on the scenario you're playing, because that's going to lean into certain strategies and make certain heroes more viable than others, giving new life to some heroes that may have been neglected in previous scenarios. I love the entire concept of this game, and it needs to be on people's top whatever 22 list, any list. I think this game's amazing, and I can't wait for the new Kickstarter that's about to come out for it. So that's my number 10. That's Ascension Tactics. Did not disappoint. My number 9 goes to Dead Reckoning, where you play as an entire pirate ship. You're the crew, the captain, and you're getting upgrades, sailing around, taking different spots of area control, and it's all ran through a card crafting system. You'll be collecting these upgrades based on the locations that you explore, and in a scythe style, you'll have various objectives that you're trying to complete in order to trigger an endgame. Now, my favorite part about this game for sure is the card crafting itself. I love the way that you're actually encouraged to go to different islands and pick up upgrades, and then if you've played a card, you can slot them onto it. You can also save those upgrades for future cards if you're looking to try to piece together specific combos. And another cool thing is every turn you get to upgrade one of your cards just basic, you flip it from level 1 to level 2, level 3, level 4, and gets new abilities and powers, and you can choose to keep that same card in your hand and just shoot up a level of one card from the very beginning of the game. And every card is viable. You can choose some that are helping with sailing, with the controlling, and then you can even choose a basic character, like a crew member, and those are even amazing when you get them to level 4, giving you resources galore, repair, and just options that you wouldn't have from your other playthroughs. Every single game in this is going to be different, and I think that you're going to have a lot of fun with Dead Reckoning. That's my number 9. My number 8 was for Darwin's Journey. I'm not going to talk a lot about any of the games that didn't actually come out, because I pretty much have nothing for you here. But Darwin's Journey is supposed to be an amazing Euro-style game where you have worker placement, where you're customizing your workers as you put them out. It follows Darwin's Journey, so think of the same theme as something like Encyclopedia, where you're gathering information and researching the different animals that live in the Galapagos areas, and you're trying to get points in a variety of research dice-centric ways. But the key linchpin here was the customizable workers using a seal system, and so that's a lot of fun to me, where every single one of your people that you're sending out is unique, and they progress just as you do throughout the course of the game. So lots of levels of engine building on this one. That is Darwin's Journey. Have not played this one. Who knows when it'll come out? That's my number 8. My number 7 goes to Dice Realms. This is an engine building game by Tom Lemon that leans into the dice customization aspect from one of the Roll for the Galaxy expansions, actually. So this game has you playing a simple game of simultaneous selection. You'll be rolling your dice and choosing what to do with those dice faces. There will also be an event die that's going to cause some weather to happen, and you're trying to gain as many points as possible while also staving off negative points. Game's trigger is end. The game end trigger is done in 3 ways, running out of one of the resource pools, and whoever has the most points wins. My favorite part about this game, though, has to be the different faces, and not just the ones that you're purchasing during the game, but at initial setup. You're going to be diving through this tile of bags, this bag of tiles, and you're taking out these tiles, and you're putting them out into the board, and that's going to determine your setup for the game. There are some suggested setups, but you can also just grab a handful, put them out, and based on what they tell you, you may add additional tiles. You may change some of the faces on that event die that gets rolled every round. I remember playing one where we had a quarantine that happened, and so all of a sudden there was a bunch of plague on the event dice, so we were losing dice faces left and right, but it also added some dice faces that were there to help combat the disease. So it was one of my friend's first experiences with it, and he's like, oh my gosh, this game is brutal. And then we played a different game afterwards, and he was like, this is crazy, the variance. And I have to agree, the variance of this is a lot of fun. You're consistently playing because you're never stopping. You roll, you get faces, you pluck them off, and then at the end, tied into the scoring is the cleanup, which I love. So that makes putting the game away just as easy as setting it up. So I like this one a lot. It's a satisfying system overall. I barely missed my top of the year as just a satisfying engine building game that's so dice centric. That is number 7, Dice Realms. Number 6, this is another game that has not come out. This is Isofarian Guard. It's bid to be this bag building adventure game where you have a single bag that you're progressing throughout the game based on the items that you take that determines what you're populating your bag with. When you get new weapons, shields, you're putting more of those armor or attack chips while also traveling through a persistent world. This one looks like it's top quality with these amazing poker chips, character sheets, and dashboards that seem to facilitate the entire experience, and I hope that it's a lot of fun. Once again, can't speak a lot to it, but it's been a long time. This is one of our longest outstanding Kickstarter games. Talked about it more over there. Go check out those videos. So that is number 6, the Isofarian Guard. My number 5 goes to John Company's 2nd edition. I was really excited for this one because it's from Whirligig Games, who made Pax Pamir 2nd edition, which is one of my favorite games from 2020, is when I think that came out? 2021. John Company's 2nd edition, though, has you playing as the East India Trading Company. So your whole goal is to exploit India and take a position of as many offices as possible, make money, and then retire off of the successful career that the East India Trading Company has given you. The game itself is ridiculously heavy, and initially I had a really negative opinion of it because I only played the solo version, and it was not satisfying at all. I was essentially going through a huge just spreadsheet load, and I'm happy to say, though, that the competitive version of this game is a blast. The game itself is made up of a variety of unique mechanisms that can all be followed on this ribbon here that travels along the side. Every phase of the game, you'll be moving the pawn around, and that will determine where you are in the round. You'll be activating the different offices of whatever you're holding on to, and then whoever owns that office does a series of actions. And at its heart, this game is a negotiation game where you're asking people, hey, can you send, if you're the master of ships, can you send the ships over here so that I can trade with them? I'll give you some of the stuff that I get from that. Or you can even have these little favor cards that say, I'll give you nepotism abilities. And a lot of crazy things can happen based on the different trades and systems that can go through. And I love this style because it feels to me, and I love this description, of the heaviest party game you've ever played. And that is very much what this game is. Because when you start playing, you're going to get to situations and setups where you're like, oh, it's this kind of game where you're rolling dice and succeeding on 1s and 2s. You're paying to get extra dice rolls. At the start of each round, you have to roll a die to see if your characters that you're holding retire. And a lot of times people can see that and be like, oh my gosh, what the heck just happened? I lost all of my people. This is a positive and a negative because that's how you get points, but it also loses your control and your ability to actually make maneuvers on the board. So you're trading this endgame stuff for current stuff, but you don't get exactly an idea of when you actually get to do it. So you've lost a lot of that control. So it's a game where you sort of are just sitting there and enjoying the ride and making decisions on kind of spur of the moment, whatever's happening and whatever is set up. One of the reasons that I have it only as a 7 is because of the length that it takes to teach, to learn, and how some people are going to be pretty turned off by this. With such a heavy game that has a lot of randomness as well, it can be something that I think people will find very frustrating, and you need a specific group to play this, I think. Someone that has that initial buy-in, that's ready to sit down. And additional, the teach is done through a rolling teach, so your first round, you're really not going to know what's going on. You're going to sit there, sort of sit down, and be like, okay, if I'm the office of this thing, I'm going to watch how it's done, and we're just going to see how it plays. So it's very hard to plan in your first game of this, and it's something that you're going to need to play multiple times to really get a big strategy for, and you'll sort of discover that in the middle of your first game and not really have a way to get out of where your position is, because it's only been 5 rounds. So that's something you need to be aware of. But if you like this theme, this idea of a chaotic, super swingy party style negotiation crazy game, this is one that I recommend. I had a great time playing this multiplayer, and once we finished, I was like, wow, that was awesome, so much fun, I want to play again, and that's a great feeling to come from. That being said, I don't know if I'd play this with everybody. It's going to be a hard one to sell to other people. Very group dependent. They need to be ready and excited for this sort of system and scenario. All that being said, totally impressed with the design as a whole, and my favorite thing about it are the different offices. As you play, there's going to be different positions that open up, and there's a hiring process where the chairman and a lot of the other office carriers, the presidents, are going to decide who gets to take up which position, and that essentially gives you characters to take actions with. So if somebody is giving you positions, then obviously you're going to want to do nice things for them, or maybe they just have no choice because you've worked your way up and you're the only option available. There's also forms of nepotism where the person in charge who's doing the hiring is not allowed to hire their own people for the job unless they have the explicit permission. That's another negotiation tactic you can use. It's a lot of fun, and the cards themselves are super intuitive, where you look at them and they tell you exactly what you can do with the different actions. Obviously, there's a lot going on here, so that's really helpful that there's so many references for everything, but as you play, you'll get more familiar, and it is something that is exciting once you've collected these characters and these different offices, and you can sort of combo the actions and get maximum value from the positions you control. Such a cool game and a cool system, and I'm so happy that the competitive mode is amazing, and it's something that I want to play more of, but I will be staying away from this one very far for that solo mode. So that is John Company 2nd Edition. My number 4 goes to Burncycle. This is a stealth game where you play as robots that are fighting against humanity because humanity has enslaved you. And so your goal is to complete a variety of missions. You'll have a randomized modular setup where you'll take a mission, you'll take your robots, and then you'll send them out to a specific corporation that's ran by some guard. And this guard has its own unique way that it interacts with you, and so you'll have this modular setup that's going to give a different unique experience each time. At the very beginning of the game, you'll decide on your character what sort of upgrades you want, and then you'll go through the burn cycle. It's this little board here on the right. You'll be placing chips there, and that determines the actions that you get to take each round and the strength at which those actions are taken. So you'll move around the board, try to satisfy your objectives while also being stealthy. There's an AI system that is going to have them moving around and patrolling and chasing you if you do end up revealing yourself or taking these noticeable actions. But the game itself is actually played in these 3 phases, essentially. You've got your phase where you're moving around your robots. You've got a phase where you are navigating the network, and this is going to give you little bonuses and extras, XP to spend on upgrades, and then you'll also be fighting like the network system of the enemy. So it seems a little detached from what you're doing on the main game board, but it is pretty important as you need to position things appropriately there to actually gain abilities and upgrades. And then you'll go into the enemy phase where they'll move around and try to find you. My favorite part about this game, though, is the characters themselves. I think it's super fun to have everything just on one sheet. It's much more simplified than something you'd see in one of the other chip theory games, which is a bit of fresh air here for the Burncycle system. Chip theory games has a lot of keywords and text. In this case, everything is contained on a single character, and at the very start of the game, you actually get the option to spend some of your starting XP to upgrade yourself right away. So you can determine how many abilities you want from the get-go and what sort of strategy you want to start playing into. I like that because you have the modularity coming from everything else, that having something a little bit more simplified makes sense in this setting. Now, overall, I think this is actually one of my least favorite chip theory games, but that's not saying much because I still think it's a fantastic game. You're going to need to go through a tutorial mission to learn it the first time, and the game does have a lot of randomness in it, whereas a lot of the other games definitely do, but I feel like sometimes you can get put into positions in this game that are a little unwinnable, and you don't know until it's a little bit too late. And In addition, this game is competing with Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood of Venice for me as my favorite go-to stealth game. And this one is one that I am going to play for something single shot. The other thing that kind of takes me away from this one is the fact that you're always using what's called a command module bot. This game looks like it's set up for 2 players here, right? So you'd be playing with these 2 robots, but you also have to play with what's known as the command module. You'll have this extra next to the Burncycle robot that you'll be placing into the map and that everybody has to control. And it's sort of like a third wheel, and it very much feels like that to me, where you have this thing that you're spending action points to move, but it doesn't really have a lot of abilities on its own. It has some passive buffs for the whole group, but it's just this thing that you got to deal with that's sort of there. So I feel like that could have been removed from the game, and it would have been just fine with your 2 characters that you're moving around. Overall, I love the production on this one. The theming is fantastic, the little bonuses that you get with it as well, and it's one that I am going to be playing more of. I don't know how frequently, though, I'm going to be playing it over Assassin's Creed if I'm in this mood, but since it is a single shot, that means it is probably going to get played a little bit more than that campaign style of Assassin's Creed. So still a fun game. That is my number 4. That is Burncycle. My number 3 goes to ISS Vanguard, where you are in control of a gigantic spaceship. Entirety of humanity has combined their efforts to use alien technology to explore the cosmos, chasing after a set of coordinates to find their true meaning. Now that's all from the prologue. I'm not going to get into any other spoilers, but the game is split into 2 major halves. You have a ship half where you are going to be managing all of your different assets, resources, crew members, sliding them into the book, moving them around, going from page to page, and having the book guide you on the different setups and rules for the game. And then after you deal with the ship, you're going to move on to the actual exploration of the planets. And this is my favorite part of the game. You'll choose which different crew member you want to send out, collect their dice from their different areas, like recon or combat, surveillance maybe. I don't remember what all the different ones are. But you'll go into the planet and be interacting with the world. You'll use your dice to perform a variety of skill tests, moving around, dealing with a variety of counters that track a lot of things, and the game makes sense. The flow is there. You have constant pressure just from your limited amount of actions, but your team is divvying them up as efficiently as possible. And it's a lot of fun exploring these planets. Another cool thing about this game is the narration in it. They have an app that you put the scripts in, so if you don't want to use a book, you can use this, and this has been one of my favorite trends in board games lately, is the addition of apps, and this one has it, and it works so well. They've got background music, different voice actors that are taking on the different roles. I think that's an awesome touch, and overall it makes for a atmosphere that's going to be one that's engrossing and engaging. I love the artwork in this game. It's a theme that I enjoy, but the thing that's stopping me from pulling it out over other campaign games in its space is probably that book phase. It's a weird space where I think there's a lot of fun stuff in the book where you're moving things around, sliding them, managing things, but it feels like I'm sort of in a perpetual state of setting things up when I'm doing this ship book phase. Like I'm just constantly reading instructions, and it's something that I have to do every single time I play. And a lot of games, I get to a point where I'm so comfortable with the different phases that I just start doing things. But with the ISS Vanguard ship book, I feel like I always have to sit and wait and pause and reread to make sure that I'm getting everything correct, because there's just so much on those different pages, and I feel like I might miss something that's key. And that can happen a lot in this game, where if you miss like a step, that could be pretty crucial for you moving on to that next page of your book or something like that. So I still prefer Etherfields. I think it's my favorite one for sure from Awakening Realms. After Nemesis, of course, I think that game is amazing, but this is one of their better campaign games. It's definitely my second favorite from the crew in general. So that's my number 3, that is ISS Vanguard. My number 2 and my number 1 are also games that have not come out, so I'll touch on them lightly here. We got Earthborne Rangers. This is another LCG from the same crew that brought us Marvel Champions, Arkham Horror, as well as Lord of the Rings, the card game, but in this post-apocalyptic setting. Excited for this one because of the theme and the design team. I trust them to make an awesome game that is a shortened story experience, but that's going to be one that has a unique theme that hasn't quite been explored. You've got a simple skill test and simple resource management system that is also tied into the actions, but also the assets you're playing, so you have a cool choice in your deck building beforehand and then throughout the course of the game with unique character classes with their own way of doing things. So if you've played LCG models, this is probably going to fall into something you're comfortable with, and I love this style of game. That's my number 2. That's Earthborne Rangers. And my most anticipated game from last year, spoilers, this is also my most anticipated game for this year. I just want this game to come out so much. This is Primal: The Awakening. This is everything I think I want in a board game. Hopefully it pans out well. you are taking on these huge monsters in a Monster Hunter style. Your character's decks are consisting of the items that you are using, and you're playing a Marvel Champions style game where you're using cards to pay for other cards as you maneuver this small tactical map. I'm going to repeat it because I think it makes so much sense. It's all my favorite things put in one. Boss battling from something like Kingdom Death Monster, card management and deck construction of Marvel Champions with a small tactical game board of Too Many Bones, but with the variety and interesting nature of this sweet monster hunting theme. And I love the idea that you can play single shot scenarios, or you can play campaigns where your things are going to level up based on the creatures you're attacking, and every single one of these enemies is going to have behavior that is their own unique thing. I want this game to come out so bad. Please be out this year. This is one that I'm just sort of like, it'll get here when it gets here, but I'm so excited. Deep in my bones, I have to constantly tell myself, hey, don't worry about it. Primal will be here when it gets here. You have so many awesome games right now to enjoy while you're waiting, and that's where I'm at with it right now. So that was my number one anticipated game, still is. That is Primal: The Awakening. Now, I want to quickly, before we wrap up this video, go through my ratings and which ones actually were my favorites from this last year. So number 7 on the list was Dead Reckoning. Once again, I think that this game is pretty dang fun, but I don't know exactly how much I'm going to get it played over these other large 4X style games. I think the downtime is a bit of a problem with those larger player accounts, and that can be a bit of a bear. And I do think, though, it is a lot of fun, and when it does get played, 3 is probably my preferred player count on this one. You've got that interaction. The solo is not something that super draws me in. My number 6 is Burncycle. I made my comparisons earlier to things like Assassin's Creed, where that's probably going to get picked first, but I love the production on this one and the new characters, and I am excited to play more of it still. I've used all the current characters, but I'm excited for when the new GameFound stuff comes in, because that just means more modularity, and I get to use more unique bots. My number 5 goes to ISS Vanguard. I think this campaign and the entire system is innovative and interesting. I love the exploration aspects of it, and overall it is a awesome experience. If you're looking for something like Star Trek in a box, I think this is a pretty good way to do it in the campaign setting. My number 4 is John Company 2nd Edition. What an interesting game, a unique experience overall, and one that when we do pull it out, we're going to have an awesome time with. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think that the experience that it does offer is so unique with the different mechanisms and clash and the bringing out of this theme, and it's a game that is logical once you're moving through it, and there's a reason for each mechanism to exist. So that is John Company, my number 4. My number 3 goes to Dice Realms. This is one that I can see getting played a lot, just grabbing for a quick game of it as you're constantly rolling dice, getting things. It's one of those huge dopamine hits as you're just constantly rolling dice and getting bonuses and just improving your gameplay to get stronger effects later. It's a sensation I enjoy in games. I think Dice Realms does it well in this space. My number 2 is actually for my honorable mention. This is Vagrantsong. Amazing campaign experience with a vibe that just gets me. There's so many smart things in the game with the use of the components, the different scenario designs, the characters, the abilities, the creativity in the objectives, and just the game as a whole. This is a campaign game you do not want to miss out on, and it's at such an affordable price, which is crazy to me that they've packed so much varied, smart, thoughtful game content in a single box. That's Vagrantsong, my number 2. But my number 1 goes to my number 10, the one I was least excited for. It blew me away. This is Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. Incredible 2-player solo cooperative head-to-head experience. I love this simplified system of Ascension. They've been doing this for years. They have refined it to a satisfying game that makes me feel like I'm playing something like a League of Legends or a MOBA style where I'm sending characters down lanes, getting abilities, they're just getting destroyed, I'm respawning them, sending them back out, constantly building up my strength, but also choosing my abilities on the board right away or upgrading myself for future turns. So some great moments, amazing turns. The buildup is there and you get it in each experience. I love this game. That is Ascension Tactics, the miniatures and deck building game, my number 1. So that's it. That's my reflection from my most anticipated games of 2022. What did you think of this video, of this list? What were your most anticipated games from last year, and what held up and what didn't? Do you agree with my thoughts here? Anything you disagree with? Anything you think I should be excited that hasn't come out, that is coming out in the future? And if you haven't checked out our most anticipated of 2023, go look at that video too. I'll leave a link in the description below. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.